The Wednesday Bookmark on Family Radio CHRI. Each week we introduce you to something new, something that'll make you think, something that might change your life. Here's this week's author interview on the Wednesday Bookmark on Family Radio CHRI.
Joining us this morning for the Wednesday Bookmark is Jon Acuff. Jon is the New York Times bestselling author of 7 books and a leadership speaker. He lives outside of Nashville with his wife and 2 teenage daughters. We're going to talk about his book, Soundtracks, this morning, the surprising solution to overthinking. Jon, really appreciate your time this morning.
Yeah, thanks for having me today. I'm looking forward to it.
You confess in the introduction that you initially discovered the secrets discussed in this book around 13 years ago. So what on earth, Jon, took you so long to write this book?
Well, it just, I was busy doing other things. You mentioned I have 2 teenage daughters, so I certainly was busy doing family stuff. And then I also didn't know if it was one of those things that would just work for me. And I didn't know if it was, a challenge only I had. So I eventually came to a place where I said, I'm going to go ask if other people could be helped by this. And when I kind of put the call out to say, hey, does anyone else struggle with overthinking, I was overwhelmed at the response.
You suggest that we should always ask our internal soundtracks 3 questions. Is it true? Is it helpful? And is it kind? Talk about the importance of those 3 questions.
Yeah, so I always tell people a simple activity to see if you have what I call a broken soundtrack, which is just my phrase for repetitive thought, is to write down a goal, write down a desire, write down a hope. It could be, I want to plant a church. It can be, I want to read the Bible in a year. It could be, I want to start a podcast. I want to write a book. Write that down and then listen to your first thoughts. Listen to your reaction, because every reaction is an education. If your first thought is, you're too old to do that, or everybody's already written that book, that might be a broken soundtrack. So you ask those 3 questions. Okay, is it true? Is this thing I'm telling myself true? The second question, is it helpful? When I listen to that over and over and over, does it help me? If I'm 5 minutes late in the car ride or pickup line at school, or to come get my kid, and I hear I'm the worst mom ever, is that true? Like in the entire world, there was a concept? Not true. Is it helpful to tell yourself? It's certainly not helpful. And the last one, is it kind? Would you say this to a friend, and would they still want to be your friend? So if you can't answer yes to those 3 questions, you shouldn't spend time and energy listening to that soundtrack over and over and over again.
One of the really helpful concepts you cover in the early chapters is this idea that our internal voices are not a switch that we can turn off. They're a dial that we turn down. Why is it helpful to think of internal dialogue as a dial versus a switch?
Yeah, that for me was probably my favorite part of the book. I was having a conversation with a Christian therapist named David Thomas in Nashville. He's part of Daystar, this amazing center for kids. And he said everybody wants a switch because they think I can do the one thing and then I'll never have negativity again. I can do the one thing and I can switch off all stress. But what happens is they try this new thing, and maybe you get, you try some exercise plan, or you join a new small group, something, and for a week it's great. All your stress is gone, but then inevitably stress comes back. And you feel like, oh, I failed. I need to go find another switch. I need to try a different diet, try a different job, try a different city, and you jump, versus going, life gets loud sometimes. Life gets stressful. We go through seasons of stress. And when the dial gets turned up, I have the permission and the power to turn the dial back down. To say, wow, I'm at an 11 right now. I really want to be at a 3. What am I going to do to actively, turn that down? And I think a lot of people after the pandemic, we asked the PhD, Mike Peasley, who's my researcher, he and I asked 10,000 people if they struggle with overthinking. 99.5% of people said yes. And that was before 2020. So if people weren't overthinking before, they certainly are now. Mm-hmm. And so everybody's dial gets loud, and you get to turn it back down.
Another really interesting technique, Chapter 4, Borrow from the Best, you call it, is on starting our playlist with somebody else's song. What do you mean by that?
What I mean is that it can be intimidating sometimes to go, hey, okay, you've been overthinking these things. Just sit down with a blank piece of paper and come up with some new soundtracks. So what I encourage people to say is, you know what, I'm going to listen to the people I'm in community with. Or I'm going to, one of my soundtracks is light and easy. Where did I get that? I got that from the Bible, because I'm told that, Christ's burden and yoke is light and easy. So for me, that's a really fun one. That's a meaningful one. And so borrowing from the best means you kind of turn on your ears and your eyes and your heart to go, okay, I'm surrounded by inspiring, motivational things. What are some that are going to encourage me? Versus going, hey, good luck, sit down with a blank piece of paper. I mean, I always tell other writers, I don't believe in writer's block. I believe in idea bankruptcy. I never sit down to a blank piece of paper by myself. I always bring ideas with me, and it's the same approach. So I encourage people, listen to, it could be a song lyric. You guys play amazing music. There are listeners right now who have been encouraged by a song lyric. That can become a soundtrack for you, something that you repeat in a positive way that moves you forward.
Okay, let's touch on a couple more things here before we bring this in for a landing. Reading from page 118, you say this: if you want to create a new soundtrack, pick a broken one that's loud and flip it upside down. How is that done exactly, John?
Well, so the example I use, I realized one day that I'm the worst boss. I run my own company, and I was, this is silly, but it's true. If I was going to try to spend an hour on a project, I had a timer on my phone, and if I was going to go get a drink of water from the, kitchen or go use the bathroom, I would pause the timer. And I thought, if I had a boss who kept a timer on his desk and paused it anytime I went to the break room to get a drink of water, that'd be a terrible boss. And so I realized, well, I'm the worst boss. And so what I did was I flipped it. I said, what would it look like to be the best boss? Because we've all had good bosses. And then I could create a list and go, okay, the bosses I've had in my life that were great, they listened, they were patient, they weren't demanding, they were encouraging. So why don't I treat myself that way? What does it look like for me to create some soundtracks that are that way? If you feel like maybe your soundtrack is, I'm unqualified to be a parent. Okay, what would it look like to be a qualified parent? Like, let's define that a little bit. Like, look at your life and go, wow, I really respect my neighbor and the way they spend time with their kids. I want to do that too. I'm going to have that be a soundtrack where, my kids get the best of my time, not the rest of it. I realize, wow, I'm working a ton and I'm coming home and I'm out of, energy, out of time, out of whatever, and I give my kids the scraps. I don't want that. As a parent, I want them to get high quality, high focus time. I'm going to change that. So I'm going to flip that from I'm unqualified to be a parent to I can learn how to be a better parent.
So many other interesting things talked about in the book we won't have time to get into. Positive affirmations, the power of those, and so on. But I want to talk about the last chapter and kind of land on this note, because you say it's your very favorite tool in the book. Discuss what it looks like to make a soundtrack stick with a symbol.
Yeah, it's fascinating. There's so many, it's been really fun. It's a business book. So if you read it, it's a business motivational book. I think if you're a Christian, you're going to read it and go, wait a second, this is all biblical. And so over and over and over again, the Bible says, hey, don't conform to the pattern of the world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Or, take every thought captive. So how do we actually do that? And one of the ways you do that is with a symbol, where you say, okay, my favorite example of a symbol that people tied to a soundtrack was the Livestrong bracelets that Nike made. They were a symbol of, okay, we're fighting cancer. I'm supporting this. I believe in this. And so a lot of times the symbol can be as simple as you pick up a pine cone because, you don't want to miss your vacation. Like, you've got a big project coming up and you can mentally be somewhere else and physically somewhere else. You could be on vacation with your family and not really even be there. So you pick that up and go, okay, I don't want to miss it. And then you keep that on your desk and remember, oh, that's right, I don't want to miss these moments. And so there's so many different ways. People will use, a coin, a piece of finish line tape from the first race they ran, a Bible verse written on a Post-it note, a tattoo. Like, I live in Nashville. There's so many tattoos that if you ask somebody, why'd you get that tattoo? They'll say, well, here's the story. Here's what this means to me. And it's often tied to a soundtrack they're trying to live. A friend of mine has Choose Joy, and she wants to be reminded, I get to choose joy. And so it's another way. The problem is you have these broken soundtracks that might have been running amok for 10 years, and then we take this baby, fresh, new idea, and we send it up against it, and we go, oh, it lost. Well, of course it lost. You've got to find creative ways to give it a shot to actually stick, and symbols can be a powerful way to do that. The other thing, just to tie it back, what did the Israelites do whenever God brought them through something? They built an altar. They got rocks. They made a big pile of rocks because they knew they'd forget. They know in the future they'd forget that. So they did a physical symbol of, this is something we're going to remember when he brought us through this moment.
Great point. Soundtracks, the surprising solution to overthinking. Jon Acuff joining us this week for the Wednesday Bookmark. Really enjoyed the book. Thanks so much for your time this morning, John.
Thanks so much for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity.
The Wednesday Bookmark on Family Radio CHRI. To find out more about this week's bookmark or hear the author interview again or to discover previous books highlighted on the Wednesday Bookmark, visit bookmark.chri.ca.